Bring us the girl and wipe away the debt. That was the deal.
Hello, my name is Ruth Mangstep. What you just saw was the beginning of the first trailer for Bioshock Infinite, a video game that came out in 2012. Now, I'd always wanted to play this game, particularly because when it came out there was a lot of controversy surrounding it, and after doing a little bit more research while trying to avoid spoilers, I realized that the controversy surrounded the main themes that the game explores while you play it, such as racism, American exceptionalism, separation of church and state, just to name a few, so I decided to pick this one to do for this assignment. Bioshock Infinite is a first-person shooter game where you play as Booker DeWitt, who, in 1912, is charged with finding a girl named Elizabeth. She is being imprisoned in the floating city of Columbia, an area in Utopia where George Washington is worshipped as a saint, and American predominance is not a political ideal but an airborne reality. Columbia was built on American imperialism and racial superiority. Founded by the game's fanatical antagonist Zachary Hale Comstock, Columbia helps end the Boxer Rebellion and is recalled to Washington, D.C. Rather than give up control of the city, though, Comstock and Columbia secede from the U.S. The history of the city, on the surface eerily clean and peaceful, is told through recordings and kinetoscopes scattered throughout the game. A chapter in the game called the Hall of Heroes allows you to visit two exhibits. The first recounts Columbia's role in the Boxer Rebellion, complete with grinning Chinese fighters, while the other is set at the Wounded Knee Massacre of 1890, where Comstock and the protagonist took part in the slaughter of an American Indian village. Columbia may be a floating city, but the game boosts its credibility as it bleeds facts into fictions, establishing its origins in actual historical events. Like I said before, Bioshock Infinite presents a number of themes worth discussing: American exceptionalism, the mix of church and state, and even weirdly enough metaphysics. But the theme of racism is necessary to point out in particular because it's important to the setting and the narrative. There's a scene where you explore an idyllic beach where white elitists talk with disdain about the unwanted workers and slaves.
Everything's changing. People don't know their place anymore.
Tell me about it. An Oriental stopped me on the street and asked me for the time. Just like that. There should be a law. I think there is.
This is the life.
I miss real beaches.
On real beaches, you've got to contend with all types of people sharing the water. Those people are not sanitary.
That's silly.
They get diseases you couldn't imagine. You don't believe me? Take a trip to Finkton. That's what the Vox Populi do. Stir up the paddies and the Negroes.
First it's labor unrest, then they're coming for you in your bed.
Comstock should stomp them out. All of them cockroaches.
Speaking of the Vox Populi, that's actually the game's response to the white elitists of Columbia. They're a resistance communist group determined to take over capitalist Columbia. Daisy Fitzroy, a former black servant who may or may not have been framed for murder by Comstock, leads the Vox Populi and later co-opts the player into helping them. Now, it would simply just be predictable if the game tried to lead you to fight on the side of the oppressed minorities, but your eventual decisions, as Fitzroy decides to put it, doesn't fit the narrative. And for what it's worth, Bioshock Infinite does try to teach the player that it would be just as bad with the Vox Populi in charge instead of the white elitists. Based on the themes discussed in the game, it's no surprise that Bioshock Infinite had its fair share of controversy. Members of the Tea Party accused Ken Levine, the game's creator, of being anti-Tea Party. Breitbart's Noah Dulles said of the game, "The problem is that the representatives of this philosophy, the founders, are straw men. Racist, xenophobic, religious fanatics, they are progressive caricatures of conservatives writ large, stripped of any subtlety, nothing but ugly monsters full of naked aggression and violent bigotry." Levine claims, "We don't try to go into these things with a particular axe to grind, but it's hard to accept his assertion based on what has been shown of this game to this point." To which Ken replied, "It's very much reflective of the current scene and the historical scene, and I think that's demonstrated by things like the Occupy movement and the Tea Party coming around during the course of the development of the game. When we started the game, there was no Tea Party, and there was no Occupy movement. During the development of Infinite, those movements came around and really changed the nature of Infinite's conversation." Generally, video games have never been very good with race. Racism is often treated by video games with the complexity of a Saturday morning cartoon. But that Bioshock Infinite doesn't conclude racism can be solved with a boss fight, because spoiler alert, it actually isn't solved at all, is what makes the game so refreshing and others embarrassing by comparison. Bioshock Infinite's racial complexities evolve further when the Vox Populi begin executing Colombians, and Fitzroy ends up holding a gun to a small white boy's head, but the point is proven, character is not defined by skin color. What's so special about Bioshock Infinite is that it can intelligently approach issues of race and still have more to say at a time when video games are still in their adolescence as an artistic medium. Playing Bioshock Infinite means confronting a time in American history when racism wasn't just overt, but actually just a normal part of society. That's it for my presentation, and thank you for watching.